right, hello and welcome to your Newsmax Daily for Tuesday, December 24th, 12/24/24. And just like that, my friends, it is Christmas Eve around the world. One of the best nights of the entire year, if not the best night of the year. Family, friends, food and drink, all the anticipation of Santa's arrival and the birth of Jesus Christ. It's also National Eggnog Day, appropriately enough. And safe travels to you if you're flying or road tripping anywhere today. There were shockwaves around the country yesterday as we discussed not only about President Biden commuting sentences of death row inmates, which we will hear some reaction to, but about the woman set on fire on the New York subway while the man who is accused of doing it and others watched her burn to death. Rob Schmitt is as stunned and sickened by this depravity as I am.
The NYPD says her 33-year-old killer walked up to her as she was sleeping and put a lighter to her dry clothing, which rapidly ignited and then spread. He then walked out of the train to that bench you just saw, sat there on the subway bench, and watched her burn and die, presumably enjoying the show. Police picked up a perfect image on body cam of the killer as he sat there and watched. They had no idea that he would still be there. 33-year-old Sebastian Zepeda then wandered off from that subway station. He would be caught on a Manhattan train a short time later. He was booked, processed. You saw him just walking out of a police precinct there. Here's how the NYPD commissioner described what happened in New York on Sunday.
One of the most just depraved crimes one person could possibly commit against another human being. And it took the life of an innocent New Yorker.
That's basically it. By now, you've likely heard the killer is an illegal immigrant from Guatemala. Sebastian Zepeda, seen here in this picture from the New York Post, came into our country illegally under Donald Trump, but was rapidly deported within a matter of days back in 2018. But at some point, perhaps over the past 4 years, as our borders have been blown wide open, Zepeda did return after being deported under Trump. And he became another colorful example of life in the United States with open borders and general lawlessness, where women are burned alive on subway trains. Earlier this year, Democrat internal polling showed that they were heading for a bloodbath in this election we just got through. That's exactly what happened. The polling proved that unlike the people who impose and write Democrat policy, most Americans are not ideological, devout psychopaths that stew away inside think tanks and college campuses. Many Democrats then tried to clean up the mess that their party had created as we moved closer to November. This started earlier this year. Kathy Hochul, back in the spring, added 1,000 National Guard troops to New York subways. Very proud of herself, cleaning things up, right? That's going to help Democrats get elected after they completely bastardized public safety for 3 years. Let's clean it up a little bit just before this election. In fact, on Saturday, Kathy Hochul posted this subway feel-good video.
I'm on the subway train heading out to Queens Center. I have a lot of, not quite last minute, but I have holiday shopping to do. I've got an adorable 2-year-old granddaughter, so it's a lot more fun to shop. I can take the subway wherever we need to go. And I want all New Yorkers to feel safe, which is why we've added so many more National Guard, over 250 more people that'll make sure that your ride is as safe as it can be.
Yeah. Post that video, and less than 24 hours later, an illegal immigrant living in a taxpayer-funded shelter camp on Randall's Island burned a woman alive in the same subway. Another example of the pain that they have inflicted on a healthy, functioning country, all for political reasons, everything we have seen since 2020. In a moment like this, Americans would love to see what? Some strength, I would assume. Stories like this are exactly why Donald Trump was elected a month ago. Take back power from these lunatics, return our quality of life. Enough pandering to the criminals, enough pandering to the bottom of our society, which, from the Democrat perspective, is you write all the rules based on what the bottom of society needs. Americans don't want that anymore, but Joe Biden still does, who one day after that story, today, Joe Biden commuted the death sentences of the most vile criminals in our society. Nearly everybody sitting on death row now is only going to serve a life sentence. That's the news today. And of course, it's a message to the most heinous and most brutal people in our society that if you do something terrible, we're not going to be as angry as we used to be, so maybe take a second thought. Try it anyways. Because that's what they've done to all law and order in this country. They've told criminals, we used to get really mad. We're not that mad anymore. And what happens? Crime explodes.
Rob Schmitt, host of Rob Schmitt Tonight, 7 o'clock Eastern on Newsmax. Rob, like myself, and you may have seen this on his Twitter, is calling for the identification and prosecution of the transit officer that just walked right by the woman on fire and did nothing. Almost like he didn't even see it. The officer is seen clearly in circulated videos now, posted all over the place, and photos. It is simply unbelievable and unacceptable. I know if it were here in Florida, Governor Ronnie D would already be all over it, right? But we haven't heard anything from Governor Hochul except a very poorly timed post on X about the safety precautions on the subway and how she deployed the National Guard following up the video that Rob mentioned. But nothing about what happened. And to be clear, there were police officers that did eventually attempt to help the woman after one or two of them just simply ignored it. As for President Biden commuting the death sentences of convicted killers, Congressman James Comer of Kentucky told Wake Up America he isn't surprised.
Joe Biden commuting the sentences of nearly all of the inmates on federal death row, 37 to be exact. What do you make of this? And it comes just 2 weeks after he followed through with the largest single-day grant of clemency in American history. And, of course, as you know, that came after he pardoned his son.
Well, I've been saying for a year now that Joe Biden was going to abuse the pardon power. And we're seeing that in real time here. He's not finished pardoning either. The question I have is who's actually making these decisions? Because we've all seen Joe Biden. We saw him when Jill Biden was reading the Christmas book to the kid. It just appeared that he doesn't even know where he is right now. And I fear that there are staffers, overzealous staffers, that are going to really abuse this pardon process. We know his family has already been the subject of abuse, and I don't think Joe Biden's finished pardoning his family. So I think you're going to see pardon reforms after Joe Biden leaves. I think you're going to see ethics reform after Joe Biden leaves. I mean, Joe Biden's legacy is so beyond the word tarnished that it's hard to explain how history will remember Joe Biden as the most corrupt president in our history.
Yeah.
You know, Congressman, I want to ask you about Speaker Mike Johnson's future. We had multiple lawmakers who talk about whether they thought he was the right man to continue as Speaker, even with your colleague Thomas Massie saying outright he would not vote for him. Do we see another prolonged Speaker battle coming in basically a week and a half?
I hope not. And here's the situation. I mean, obviously, I felt like McCarthy should have been given an opportunity to finish his term. So, it was Mike Johnson didn't ask to be in this position. This was the result when Matt Gaetz and 7 of my colleagues joined with 211 Democrats to vacate the speakership. And that was a 3.5-week ordeal. This is a tough job. We have a lot of independent-minded Republicans in Congress. In some ways that's good. But when you get into a situation like we were in last week, it's very difficult. And I think Mike's got a difficult job. McCarthy had a difficult job. If we replace Mike Johnson, we need to make sure whoever is going to be nominated to replace Mike Johnson has the 218 votes. Because right now, I don't think anyone in our conference can get 218. I don't know whether Mike has 218 or not, but I certainly don't want to do what we did 2 years ago and go through the whole first week in limbo. So hopefully if there are more than 2 of my colleagues, 2 or 3, that don't want to support Mike Johnson, hopefully they think they've got a plan B, because the last time we did this, there was no plan B, and America got really upset with the behavior of the House Republicans over wasting essentially a whole month of legislation.
That's Congressman James Comer, chair of the House Oversight Committee on Wake Up America, and he is absolutely on the money. If there are Republicans that want to get rid of Speaker Johnson, they better have a plan B, because Republican voters will be extremely disgruntled, to say the least, if they muck it all up again like they did electing Kevin McCarthy. You remember that mess. And then when they got rid of McCarthy, and like they did in Trump's first term when they wanted to axe Obamacare, but then had no plan at all to replace it after talking about it for years. Republicans simply must do better. There are some Democrats that don't agree with Biden giving life sentences to killers on death row as well, but Georgia Senator Raphael Warnock isn't one of them. Listen to this.
I was heartened by his announcement, and when we look at some of the inequities in the system, I hope that he will continue to make use of his clemency authority.
He's heartened by killers getting to live out their lives in prison at our expense. We, the people, our tax dollars, will now go to keeping the worst of the worst criminals alive for the rest of their lives. Look at some of the inequities, he said. Inequities? They're killers. Some of them murdered children. More from Newsmax host Joe Pinion.
A woman burned alive. A cop killer's sentence commuted. A serial killer and a murderer of children given a second chance to live until his golden years. Yes, folks, welcome to the final wretched days of Joseph Robinette Biden's America. January 20th and the second term of Donald J. Trump can't come fast enough. You see, today, on the eve of Christmas Eve, the same man who used the power of the American presidency to help his own son, Hunter Biden, escape any and all accountability, robbed countless American families of justice and commuted 37 federal death row inmates. 37 of the worst, the rotten of the rotten. With the stroke of a pen, Joe Biden has given them a new lease on life. Literally. See, this is a picture of Navy Petty Officer Second Class Amanda Snell. She raised her hand to serve her country. She was prepared to die in service of this nation. Instead, her life was stolen by a brother in arms, by this pathetic excuse for a man, Jorge Avila Torres, a disgraced Marine who, by his own admission, snuck into Officer Snell's room, tied her up, and then used the power cord of her own laptop to strangle her to death. See, nobody deserves to die that way. Least of all, any woman who raises her hand to serve on behalf of a grateful nation. And today, the memory of that brave naval petty officer second class was treated like a second-class citizen. Today, the Commander-in-Chief of the United States of America said that the life of Amanda Snell mattered less than the unhinged political sensibilities of his morally bankrupt Democratic Party. And what's worse, Amanda Snell is not the only person that this monster Jorge Avila Torres murdered. He also killed these two beautiful little girls, 8-year-old Laura Hobbs and 9-year-old Crystal Tobias. He stabbed them to death, both of them, on Mother's Day in 2005. And for every Mother's Day since then, their families have had to live with that pain. The pain that the anniversary of the day that made them a family coincides with the anniversary of the nightmare that destroyed their very existence. You see, sane people do not commute the sentences of monsters like Jorge Avila Torres. But it is quite clear that this president and his party have lost their America-hating mind a very long time ago. And so it would be one thing if this was just about Joe Biden. But this moral rot, this disdain for the suffering of everyday American citizens, it is palpable all across the political left.
Newsmax host Joe Pinion, and I'm going to fast forward here to where he says January 20th can't come fast enough.
So yes, we should be really excited about January 20th, where the 45th president of these United States, Donald J. Trump, is sworn in as our 47th president for our great nation. But Donald Trump's victory on November 5th is not the end of our season of discontent. It is a day in America where our mourning for America gives way to the light that delivers action. We cannot continue to find common ground with people who think that commuting cop killers is mercy, as Joe Biden did this morning. We cannot find common ground with those whose response to Tren de Aragua taking over whole buildings in Colorado is to say, don't worry, it's just a couple buildings. We cannot keep finding common ground with people who look at 320,000 missing children, many of whom we know have been trafficked for sex by criminal cartels, and say we can't officially classify them as missing until they fail to show up for their court date. Not anymore. So yes, mourning in America. It starts January 20th when Donald J. Trump takes the oath of office, when Tom Homan fires up the largest deportation apparatus the world has ever seen. But it will not end until we have dug out once and for all of this left-wing insanity, root and stem. May our nation never be forced to relive the failures of Joseph Robinette Biden and his cohorts ever again.
Man, I love that guy. Joe Pinion, filling in on last night's Greg Kelly reports and bringing the goods as always. President-elect Trump has also said that he wants all federal workers working back in the office come January. Bob Brooks breaks it down.
Look, everybody, I'm at work. Like I am every day. It's not hard. It's a part of life. You show up to work, you do your job, you get paid for your output, what you produce. It's the way it's been like forever up until COVID. But COVID is obviously over. However, our federal government is acting like it's still happening. And there are a lot of people in Washington who want it to continue. But there's a battle to put an end to the madness. Trump obviously leading the charge. He has said this. Trump says federal workers who don't want to return to the office, they're going to be dismissed. DOGE has talked about that. Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy. And the woman that's been tapped to lead the DOGE caucus is already getting to work as well. Here we go. Senator Joni Ernst demanded that the heads of 24 federal agencies immediately cease negotiations with employees regarding telework. Ernst and the incoming Department of Government Efficiency have scrutinized remote work for federal employees, arguing that it hurts productivity and wastes taxpayer money. But here's what's happening before Trump gets into office. Quote, anticipating a crackdown, federal employee unions are rushing to negotiate telework agreements through 2029, barring DOGE from interfering with it. Work from home until 2029. Look, we've talked about this. But Ernst did an investigation on the impact of telework and the waste it has created and lack of productivity. Based on what she found, it's bad, everybody. Really bad. And I'm going to start with this. 6% report in person on a full-time basis, while nearly a third of the government workforce is entirely remote. I mean, come on. We all know what goes on when people are working from home. You're not stupid. Now, I'm sure there are some people who get after it, but there's some ridiculous stuff going on that she found out, and it has real negative ramifications. This isn't just people screwing around. Americans are suffering as a result of this. The senator found this out. Perhaps most disturbing, thousands of calls from veterans seeking mental health care went unanswered, and therapists didn't even show up for their appointments with veterans at an Atlanta VA. Meanwhile, a manager responsible for overseeing the scheduling of veterans appointments in Atlanta dialed into a meeting from a bubble bath and even posted a selfie on social media soaking in the tub with the caption, "My office for the next hour." That's disgusting. She also wrote, working from home has potentially resulted in sickness. Some Americans are literally getting sick of employees not showing up to do their jobs. Babies may be harmed because a whistleblower complaint was left unread by the Food and Drug Administration. Warnings about unsanitary conditions at a baby formula factory linked to the deaths emailed and FedEx to the agency were ignored for months as the problem grew worse. The FDA says the oversight was likely due to COVID-19 staffing issues. Go figure. I'm going to cite one more example here. Folks in Iowa caring for disadvantaged contacted me, the senator, frustrated by the lack of responsiveness from the local Social Security Administration, the office where employees telework several days a week. Months passed before receiving replies to simple questions, causing significant delays serving the elderly and disabled. So I hope this is sinking in. We are paying these people's salaries, and these agencies, they exist to serve us. But it's becoming clear that working from home is not in our best interest.
That's Bob Brooks, co-host of American Agenda at 2 o'clock Eastern. If you missed it, President-elect Trump named Callista Gingrich, the wife of former Speaker Newt Gingrich, as one of the U.S. ambassador nominees, writing on Truth Social that he picked Callista Gingrich to serve as U.S. ambassador to Switzerland. She served as the ambassador to the Holy in Trump's first administration and mainly lived in Italy. On Wall Street, stock markets opened mostly in the green. The Dow was down a few points, 10, 15 points or so. Markets close at 1 o'clock Eastern today for the holiday. They will reopen on Thursday after Christmas. And one final note, actor Alec Baldwin has been completely cleared of all charges and wrongdoing related to the shooting death of a cinematographer on the set of a movie several years ago. New Mexico prosecutors decided not to appeal the judge's ruling back in July that dropped the involuntary manslaughter charges against Baldwin. Why do you care? Well, the good news is now Baldwin will be legally allowed to move out of the country, as he promised after Donald Trump won the election last month. Be sure to keep up with all of the news and breaking developments throughout the day on Newsmax, N2, and Newsmax.com. I'm Tony Marino. This is the Newsmax Daily. Thank you, as always, for listening. Have a wonderful and safe Christmas, a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, which begins tomorrow night. As difficult as it may be at times, cherish this special time with your family and friends, and especially if you have, young children. Best time of the year for sure. And keep on fighting the good fight.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the Newsmax app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
It's Jerry Callahan from The Callahan Show. You can listen to us every day. We react to the latest news, politics, sports, and all the madness in the world. I'll give you my opinion with a little edge, a little attitude. I'm an unapologetic right-winger, trapped behind enemy lines in deep blue Boston, so I'm used to taking on the mainstream media mob. You can hear us anywhere you get your podcast, or you can listen every day at newsmax.com/listen.
Information, truth is freedom, is Newsmax.